All right. Well, everybody, thanks for joining us here today. Happy Pride Month. Um, so last year, as part of the Pride Committee, CoWorks did something really amazing and created a Pride Council where a lot of the members were able to sit on a panel and share our stories and experiences and really just talk about our involvement and how proud we are being part of the LGBTQIA plus community. I think I got all the letters. It's constantly growing and changing. Um, but you all had a lot of great questions that came up last year that afterwards the panelites sat back and kind of reflected and discussed about some of the questions you were asking. We we had an opportunity to know more about how to, address them. That could be like with the pronouns or how we can be, an ally and show up for our field talent, how we have communications with conversations with clients if needed about it. So the team this year has decided that we were going to bring on a guest speaker, someone who has a lot of experience with, diversity, inclusion, and acceptance, someone who is a proud member themselves of the LGBTQIA plus community. And that person here is Troi Grimes. It's also the other person whose camera is on. Just a quick introduction about Troi. He is a motivational speaker and also a seasoned linguist who has dedicated his career and service to promoting justice and being a huge catalyst in bridging cultural gaps. Troy served in the United States Army. He's been deployed to Iraq, has lived and worked in the Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, and has really been involved in the community. Troy has also done volunteer work while out there as well, using his time and resources. He works in schools and communities in Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, Uganda. The list goes on. He's been with groups with Doctors Without Borders, the Red Crescent, the International Rescue Community, and also serves on the board of directors of Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Heart of Georgia. Currently working at UPS in the corporate security department, but Troi still takes a lot of passion and has been so great with his time today, joining us to talk more about the diversity inclusion for this Pride Month event. So just to kind of give, before I let Troi take it away, we do have a Q&A section at the top of the teams. If you have any questions that you would like to ask, please, by all means, just type your question in there. I will, let Troi be answering throughout. If there's more of a, say, question that you have that you don't necessarily want to ask, but you still want to learn more, you are more than welcome to message me and Amanda ourselves, and we can go ahead and get those answers for you. But we encourage this to be a huge open dialogue engagement, through the chat. Stay muted while Troy is going through this presentation. But Troy has made it clear to the Pride Committee that he is an open book and he will answer your questions. So by all means, if you have them, please ask. Troy, if you want to take it away.
Well, thank you for that glowing introduction, and I appreciate the Pride Council, the leadership of your organization, and everyone who has made it possible for me to join you today. Brandon had it right. He said, I'm an open book. If you feel comfortable asking the question, I feel comfortable answering it. I believe communication is a big piece of everything we're trying to do here, which is to educate each other, which is to make everybody feel included and inclusive. And again, your organization is committed to that, and I can appreciate that. You can tell that just by investing in people, in you guys, for this type of engagement. And I consider these type of engagements as investments. It's not a printout. It's not a computer-based training where we're clicking buttons. It's not just me rambling, but this is an opportunity for real-time engagement in an effort to bring awareness and to enhance what everybody has going on in the organization. And since I'm the type to fill every unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, some of you may recognize that from something. Let's start right here from the title. Let's jump into the talk from the title, the value in visibility. And to me, visibility and authenticity go hand in hand. It's June. I'm a guest of the Pride Council, but visibility and its benefits is significant and not just limited to members of the LGBTQIA plus community. Bear with me when I'm going with the acronyms, okay? Because I can get I get confused sometimes myself. But when I say visibility, the importance of visibility, the significance of it, that's relatable to all of us. When I think about visibility, I think of a friend of mine. She was a client. I'm do some writing. She was a client, and she's successful. She's not a part of the LGBTQIA plus community. She's a heterosexual cisgender woman. And her, I'm here in Atlanta. This friend, her footprint can be seen throughout Atlanta. And she was successful before she decided this, but one day she said she chose to be very conscious of the spaces that she chose to take up and allow herself to be in. And she said she just got fed up with finding herself in places in corporate America and in this big rat race. She got fed up with finding herself in spaces where she was not allowed to show up authentically. And although she was successful and made a lot of money and was able to do a lot of things, she said when she decided to stop being in spaces that she was not allowed to show up authentically, she really thrived. And that's when she really began to shine. And again, her footprint is in places throughout Atlanta. And I see things that she's had a hand in, and I know that she's had a hand in. And it makes me smile because I know she's in a space that she's able to show up authentically and she's able to make such an impact. And this is important for not only for us as individuals to say, hey, I'm going to claim my space and show up authentically, but it's as the culture shifts, corporations and companies are starting to realize that they have to shift with the times. If they do not allow people to show up authentically and bring their whole selves to work, there are other places that are allowing that. So I can appreciate when organizations make the effort to understand what matters to their employees. So to me, that's the value in visibility. We're going to keep it moving. Here's the agenda today. Meet the presenter. That's me. I'll give you a little bit more background about myself. We'll talk about why pride. What's the big deal about pride? We're going to navigate these acronyms and pronouns together. I am, let's say this, I'm still learning certain acronyms and pronouns myself. The language changes every day, things change. We're going to navigate this thing together. And since we're navigating, we're going to follow that whole theme and we're going to talk about driving the car being creating, cultivating environments that of acceptance. And sometimes we have to adjust our approach and our attitude and realizing our impacts. Then we're going to have some key takeaways in the question and answer. Remember, like Brandon said before, throughout this conversation, and that's what I want it to be, a conversation, not just a presentation, but throughout this conversation, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. Brandon will serve as moderator, as will Amanda, I believe. I may glance over and see something. And if something comes up that you want to talk about or you have a question about, do not feel the need to save it to the end. You're not going to interrupt me. It's not a disruption. If you want your question to be a little bit more anonymous and don't want it to come from you and your name, you can drop it to Brandon or Amanda, and they will field your questions a little later. Presenter, hey guys, this is me. I am a citizen of the world. And that kind of happened by chance. Right after 9/11, I was a student at FAMU University. During 9/11, I decided to join the military reserves and ended up finding a career that I loved. On one note, I was protecting people, but I was also in a position that I was able to bridge gaps between the right and the left and the west and the east, and also just being in a space that helped to change people's perceptions. And maybe that's why I'm drawn to organizations that serve people in these communities and serve children, because children don't have these preconceived notions of us. If you show up and you just want to spend some time, if you show up and you're trying to assist or help, children just see somebody who's there, who's spreading love and light. And that's something I try to promote and try to get people involved in these organizations that especially those that serve children. But I've traveled extensively throughout the world. I moved back to the United States in 2018 And that's when I began working in my current function at UPS. And just so I'm not constantly name dropping, I will refer to my organization, and you'll hear me referred to as my organization. And that's where I currently am. You see my little doggy in my backpack there. She goes with me everywhere. I've done some ghostwriting. Like I said, I'm a veteran and I'm an advocate. When I say I'm an advocate, it's not necessarily for one group or for one subsection of society. When I find somebody or see someone who does not have a voice, it's just in my nature to try to spread awareness, help that person, and help them find their voice. I don't want to be your mouthpiece. I want to help you find the tools and get comfortable using the tools to be your own mouthpiece. But if you can't, there's always going to be somebody like me that's going to be there to try to urge you along. That's what advocacy is to me. Moving right along. Why pride? I hear that question expressed in so many different ways when it relates to the LGBTQI community. Like, what are you proud of? Okay, if you're saying it's not a choice, what are you proud of? I did some research on the word pride before. And I almost think it's a disservice that when we hear or say or use the word pride, we have been conditioned to believe pride has to be tied to an achievement. We tend to tie pride to productivity. When I started doing some digging in my own research, I saw this definition of pride, and it was from Cambridge actually, and it said consciousness of one's dignity. And to me, that's even if people can't answer the question the way you want to answer it when you put them on the spot with it. Well, if you're gay or if you're lesbian or if this or that, or even if you're black or brown, what are you so proud of? It's consciousness of one's dignity. And so, for people who do not belong to some of these communities who have been systemically robbed of dignity, if you frame that definition this way, maybe you can understand why people who have been robbed of their dignity, when they finally get a platform, when their voices are finally heard, they decide to shout it from the rooftops, and they refuse to be silenced. So I can appreciate that. While I am a proud member of the LGBTQI plus community, I'm probably not the loudest person in the parade. I probably haven't been to more than two or three parades, to be honest. I don't know if I own anything that's rainbow patterned in my closet. Some people would look at me and say, for those reasons, and say, "Oh, well, you're not a legitimate advocate." But there are other places that I show up and advocate, and I display that consciousness of dignity, and I carry with me the knowledge that there were people that came before me who are not able to display that consciousness. So I'm gonna take this opportunity and let's have a poll here. I want you to answer. You can type your answers into the poll will be launched, and you should be able to type your answers, and we'll see answers as they come up. What are some of the things, or what would you like to take away from this talk? I've given you some background on me. I've told you what we are going to talk about, and I've given you the definition of pride that we're going to work from. But what's something you would like to get from this talk? Are my polls working?
Oh,
Yes, it's
I think
coming,
both
Troy.
Sean and I sent a poll, so my bad. We'll
Okay.
remove one of them.
I don't have any responses. Come on, guys. What is something you'd like to take away from this talk, or what's something you'd like to learn from this talk, or what's a specific question that you have that you'd like to hear answered? All right, somebody from my council work with me. Let me know if you are seeing any results come in.
Yeah, I'm so far seeing a lot about, how to be a better ally,
Okay, I
or
can't, for some reason, I can't see anything. All right.
it's a different tab, I believe, but I see it. So about being, comfortable asking questions, knowledge,
Okay, I see
um,
some stuff now.
education.
Someone put in roadblocks finding a job, which outside of the poll, so I just wanted to make sure we saw that one.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for those. And those are definitely some things that will be addressed as we go on with this conversation. And again, if how can corporations do more? Okay. Discrimination. As we touch on some of these subjects, and if you have specific questions, please feel free. We have someone looking down at the questions that pop up in the chat, and we or save them to the end if you feel like that'll be a better place to insert your questions. And we definitely want to address those because those are important talking points. Let's get to the good part. It's navigating acronyms and pronouns. I get asked a lot, when is it going to stop? When will this list stop being added to? And I get it, it becomes overwhelming. It's overwhelming for people who are members of this community, I promise. But you also have to understand the evolution of language and society. And again, you have people who have been excluded for so long that when it's finally time to be included, hey, put that up there. We're going to include this. We're going to include this because the whole point is inclusive in being inclusive. One of the things that I think of when I think of these acronyms and pronouns is that even if you don't get it perfectly right, there is value and appreciation in trying. We can go, let's start with even the definition of sexuality and gender. Someone told me before that my gender is who I lay down as, and my sexuality is who I want to wake up to. So when people gets kind of gets kind of strange to some people, but you can have someone who is transgender, someone who was born in a physically in a male's body, who feels that they are transgender and they transitions to a female, and they are sexually attracted to a female. That is not uncommon. Um, so gender and sexuality, we have to look at it as two different things. Again, it can be overwhelming, it can be difficult to wrap your head around, but that's actually the separation of gender and sexuality is very important when you're talking about the acronyms and pronouns within the LGBTQIA community. The first ones we hear about, we know, we kind of heard all the time. Lesbians, we think of lesbians as one who identifies as a woman and who's sexually attracted to women. Gay is kind of an umbrella term that can be used to get everybody to envelop everybody that's pictured on the screen, but it also historically is used as someone who identifies as a man who's attracted to men. When we get down to transgender and transsexual, people often ask, well, what's the difference between the two? We look at transgender as more of the umbrella term. A lot of times, a transsexual person is someone who's defined as being both, well, actually, transgender and transsexual, as someone who does not feel aligned with the physical body they were born in. A lot of times, the difference comes that people think of the transgender person as the one who has actually had undergone some kind of medical transition. When we say the word queer, queer is another umbrella term that can envelop the whole of the entire spectrum. And a lot of times, a lot of people who are queer consider themselves someone who is attracted to everybody, and that they themselves don't necessarily fit neatly into a box when it comes down to male, female, trans, non-binary. Questioning, somebody who may feel like I really don't know, but I know I'm not totally heterosexual. Then we have ally, asexual, that's someone who just is not sexually attracted to anybody. We appreciate the allies there. Those are people who align themselves with the community, but are not necessarily members of it. And we get to these pronouns. This is where it gets interesting, especially when you get down to the ZE and the XE. Those have been adopted by some people and some organizations to signify how inclusive they are. You don't hear them often, but they can be used in place of they and them. Sometimes that they and them gets a little strange because it sounds like you're speaking of several people or plural, a group. Z and Z, that's XE and ZE, are often used for one person. That's Z, Zim, and Zers, and ZE, Zer, and Zers. I know it gets confusing. Just one of the takeaway here is if you see it, understand that this person is trying to signify that they are non-binary. They may not identify as either male or female strongly. All right. So any questions on these pronouns or acronyms? We need to spend some time here. This is true, Rocco. I'm looking, transgenders do not have to have any surgery to say that they are transgender. I use that language to explain that's how some people identify the difference between transgender and transsexual, although that difference, even in the medical community, is not defined perfectly. It's not a clean cut answer that you can get even in the medical community there. Any other questions on acronyms or pronouns? All right. Moving right along. Now allow me to reintroduce myself. I don't know if you got anybody in here can recognize this person at the bottom of your screen. That's me. So I identify as transgender. That could be I was born in a female body. So I'm also can be considered trans man. So when you say the word trans man, you're talking about a transgender man. Transgender, basically, I was born in a female body. I transitioned. Now I'm a transgender man. So we have a trans man. So all that stuff that I was talking about, working with special forces, working in these communities outside of the United States, I was doing that, some of that as when I was female bodied, and some of that after I transitioned to male. So here we go. So this is always one of those things. People ask me about my transition, what happened. The transition began maybe about 8 years ago. I was and I was actually overseas. I was between Afghanistan and Dubai, working in both places when my transition began. And we could talk about some of the experiences that I had, both in the work areas, with my family. My family's always been very supportive. My friend group has been very supportive. So I've actually been in a position to thrive with this. Now that I have your attention, moving right along, we talk about visibility, for people to show up authentically, for people to show up as themselves. They have to believe that that the culture, that the community, that the environment that they are in will accept them as they are. All right. And for one thing that's important for companies and management and leaders to understand, that this is an actual commitment when it comes down to cultivating this culture. We all see what's going on the news right now. Fads are trendy, marketing is tricky, but when an organization makes a commitment to cultivating an environment of acceptance, that is sustainable. All right. And I've seen it throughout my work career. I've seen it throughout my life navigating different spaces. Um, that what sustains is what has actually been is what's sincere. That's even a good way to put it. You could tell a trend, you could tell when someone's insincere jumping on a bandwagon. And usually those are the last ones in the fight and the first ones out. But when it comes down to really making this culture of acceptance a woven part of your fabric, it is a commitment, and it begins with leadership. Somebody might say, why do we need a culture of acceptance? You come to work, you're here, you go home. But we know that we spend what, on average, if you work full time, you spend at least 40 hours a week dedicated to a job, bringing parts of yourself to this job. So it's hard to cut certain things off. Yes, certain things are not appropriate for work. We get that. But at the end of the day, everyone thrives when you are able to bring your whole self to work. Excuse me. People are more productive when they are in an environment where they know they are accepted. I remember when I was in the military, we were on a field training exercise. So basically, think of it as a military camping trip. And we were in the cold, and I had on all these layers. And a higher ranking sergeant said to me, Grimes, you got on all those clothes, right? Does it slow you down? I said, no, I'm comfortable. And I pointed out to him, we're out here below zero. I've already proven that I can be out here in it. But think of it this way. If I have only enough energy to fight the enemy or the elements, don't you want my energy directed to the enemy? And you can translate that into corporate America or the job field. You can either have people sitting at their desk or trying to go about their jobs, but at the same time, they're afraid that somebody's going to expose something about them, or afraid that or sitting in an environment where they know they are not accepted and they're not going to be performing at their best. However, if the only focus there is, hey, bring yourself here. We want your personality. We want what you're bringing to the table. We value the whole of you. That person is going to be a lot more productive. And again, attitudes like this begin with leadership. We all come from different backgrounds. That's just the truth. We all come from different values, different belief systems, and some of that shifts and changes, but we definitely have different attitudes. Leadership can't change your attitude. Leadership can't come down and say, hey, you are going to like this person or you are going to accept that. And that is okay. What leadership can do is impress upon the employees or the people that make up an organization what is acceptable and what forms a hostile, what constitutes a hostile environment. In my current position, I can say there are 5 people on my team. I have 2 peers, and there's a manager and a director. They do not know that I'm transgender, but there has never been a time that I have felt uncomfortable, that I've heard anything that was inappropriate, and there's nothing that would keep me from telling them. It just hasn't come up, and it may actually after this talk today. But and I said earlier, I work for UPS, so even before I went into a corporate role, I worked in a warehouse, a different work environment, different leadership, well, same leadership, but different attitudes, but I still there. So over the course of 4 years working for this company and no one knowing that I was transgender, I have never been made to feel a certain way. And that's not because people are walking on eggshells. That's because the company has let people know what is acceptable, what's not acceptable, what will be tolerated, and what will not be tolerated. Flip side of the same coin, in 2018, I was attached to a special forces unit from the 7th group as an intelligence official. I was in Afghanistan, a team leader. I speak the language. I'm out there analyzing routes, going out into the cities, helping our special forces. When I say our, I mean U.S. Special Forces, train Afghan troops, because this is about the time we were trying to get out of Afghanistan. At this same time, military leadership publicly stated transgender people were a distraction to the military. I was in the same position then. Nobody on my team knew that I was transgender, but all of a sudden, my attitude changed. Now I became afraid, but it was like a lid came off of a pot. I was exposed to all kind of disgusting rhetoric, and people were saying pretty hurtful and hateful things. It also came down to me a matter of personal safety. People would just openly spew what they would do if they knew of transgender people being in the military, or if transgender people were allowed in war environments. And there I was in a combat environment, and I'm suddenly exposed because leadership, and this is politics aside, but because leadership decided without knowing the facts that a transgender person in the military was a distraction. So again, we're starting to drive this car. We've navigated through some of the acronyms and the pronouns. Now we're in this car. We're cultivating a culture of acceptance that begins with leadership. Commitment is necessary. It can't just be something that's going with the trends, but it definitely increases productivity. Next thing we're going to talk about with this, it's sometimes you have to adjust your approach. In adjusting your approach, we have to allow space for growth and evolution. And that is so important to me. Allow space for growth and evolution. This thing is new to a lot of people. And when I say this thing, I mean these cultural shifts that we are now all a part of. Sometimes people have questions about what's appropriate or have questions about just general curiosity. And often it's not offensive, but fear of being offensive keeps us from engaging or asking questions. And that's where we have a big divide. Communication is very important. You see that there is a no communication is key. But if we're all afraid of being offensive or we're all afraid of expressing ourselves because there's no room for growth, then it leaves us all in a stalemate and we never progress. I have made this mistake myself of not allowing space for growth for people. Um, I never really came out to my parents. I just kind of, well, they already knew. We could kind of laugh at it. You know, how many of you have been in situations and somebody has this big outing and everybody's like, we kind of knew. That's not everybody's story. It was mine. I just started bringing women home. It worked out fine in the end, don't worry. But I was always able to talk to my father a little bit more openly than my mother. And I remember my mother years later asking me why I didn't talk to her about it. And I told her, well, Mom, I remember there was a time when I was about 12 or 13 years old, and the news was on, and this was they were talking about gay marriage in states. This was still when it was up to individual states to decide the legality and whether or not gay people could get married in the state. And I remember my mother made a comment and she said something to the extent of, I don't care what they do, they just don't need to try to get married. Why are they trying to get married? Mind you, I was 12 or 13 years old. 20 years later was the first time I mentioned that to my mother. And that was only because she asked me directly why, when I was younger, I did not feel comfortable expressing myself. We still hold people to certain things and certain thoughts or things that they may have expressed without giving them that grace for growth and evolution. And that's something that we all want ourselves. So, with education and communication, there's room for that growth. So, but sometimes, again, it's necessary to adjust these approaches, how we talk to people, the tones we use, the language we use. But it's also on the other side is our responsibility to educate people on what is appropriate, what uh, what is offensive or what's not offensive, but allow that wiggle room. We can't be so quick to cast somebody out because they misspoke, especially when it didn't come from a place of harm. One size does not fit all. I think we got a question.
We did have a we had a good quote that a lot of people are loving from you, and that is the fear of being offensive keeps us from asking questions.
Okay.
So a lot of agreements with there. We have a few questions, but I can go ahead and
Okay.
ask one of them. Is like, what advice can you give to people on how to be an advocate for the LGBTQ plus community, especially when it comes to speaking with our clients?
And I will say this when it comes down, we're going to talk about allyship, but it's interesting that you bring up the clients now, Michelle. One thing, and I can understand people do not want to be confrontational. I definitely one thing to talking to the leadership of your organization and the team that's responsible for getting me here. I can say I know that you are vested in your people, protecting your people, and putting your people in places where they are appreciated. Some people are not, some clients are not as forward as you. Some are not on the ball like you guys are. The trigger word for everybody though is EEOC. Nobody wants to be on the wrong side of that. So even if someone is in a position to address a concern that an employee had about something a client said, something that they can wait, is my camera working?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I wasn't sure my camera was working. I'm sorry about that.
All good.
Uh, okay, I'm sorry about that. But one thing we can say is one thing that you can use almost as a blanket statement is that we adhere to all EEOC. We adhere to all EEOC conditions, and we also adhere to all social compliance compliance standards. And so even though companies may want to give you some pushback on certain things, when it comes to EEOC standards and social compliance standards, those things can't be redlined. Nobody in the state of Georgia can come through there and say, well, we don't really have to comply with that. So it's definitely no client, no individual client that can say that. So a lot of times just using those kind of trigger words, and not even in a confrontational way. You may not want to get confrontational. You may feel uncomfortable. You don't want to be the person responsible for losing this account. But if you, hey, we have to comply with EEOC here when it comes to our employees, that's a good way to address things like that.
All right, thank you. Another question that we had popped up, I'm gonna ask this, we can continue on the presentation and have more questions pop up. But how is the best way to, establish pronouns with a new contact, whether that is a field talent or maybe, someone coming in, you want to be, make sure we call them by their preferred pronoun.
All right. I'm going to give another analogy here. When I showed up in the organization that I currently work for, I remember I'm the person that said that I probably don't own anything with a rainbow on it. And so I get there and I'm in court. I've been promoted to a corporate position, and everybody's email signature block, not everybody, it wasn't a rule, but 90% of the people had pronouns in their signature block. And for someone like me, I was thinking everybody was just going overboard. I'm like, all these people cannot be in the LGBTQI plus community. Impossible. And so one day I was talking to somebody from human resources, and she said, and one of the ways that we practice being inclusive is that we give people the option, and we actually promote people putting their pronouns in their signature blocks, so that when the person who does feel a need to put it there does it, they don't feel like they're out of place. They're not sticking out like a sore thumb. So that was an instance that I kind of had to slap myself on the wrist and told myself, stop being so cynical. It's not all about you. Everybody's experience has not been yours. So sometimes I do, even in this space, I have to take a step back and understand being inclusive means considering other people's feelings outside of your own. So the question about the pronouns, when everybody bands together and does certain things or make little efforts, not only is that a form of allyship, but it's welcoming, but it also gives other people the chance to be authentic. Okay, everybody's sharing their pronouns. I can share mine. Or you can just ask directly, to be honest. Do you have preferred pronouns? And that's definitely not offensive, especially if you ask everybody and not somebody that just seems to present. You can just start off conversations and people know, hey, when James comes, James is going to ask you, what are your preferred pronouns? I'm James, he, him. What are yours?
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. Troy, I'm getting a lot of questions coming through. For the sake of time, do we want to
All
get
right.
through the presentation first
Yeah.
and then ask
Yeah.
questions?
Yes. So let's speed through the presentation
Okay.
because I want to get through to as many questions as possible. One thing I do want to spend a little time on, though, is this one size does not fit all. All right. I am here as Troy. Yes, I am a member of this a certain group, but I also want you to realize this is my perspective. Now, there's certain educational things I can share with you, certain tips about interaction, but because I'm comfortable with any question, everybody else may not be. But again, my journey has not been is unique to me. So, but just because I'm not sensitive to certain things, don't think other people's are too. But I just want to put something in perspective to you. Some people may have caught on, but before I showed that slide with the little girl there, me as a child, you may not have picked up that I was transgender. I can easily live invisible in this thing and go on, and everybody would think that I was just a regular cisgender guy, go on about my life, my career, and not have to have that spotlight or subject myself to scrutiny. I choose to because I choose to bring awareness to the fact that trans people are not these stereotypes, are not these caricatures. One size does not fit all, and sometimes that comes down to policy. It's it's easier to think. I'm not going to speed through, Kathy. I see you. So when we think of, it's easy to make blanket statements with forgetting that there's humanity there, that there's a person there. And sometimes we make blanket statements to satisfy other people or for political reasons. We have to remember, politics aside, and we're dealing with people. Just, I want you to wrap your heads around this. Think about a government building and how many restrooms are available in a government building. And we're talking about a large government building, maybe the the governor's mansion. How many bathrooms are there? And it's open to the public. Some people would say it's easier to just say, it would be easier to make a couple of those bathrooms, maybe one or two family restrooms or gender neutral, rather than tell me, Troi, who's before you today, that it's illegal for me not to go to the women's restroom. So one size does not fit all. That's definitely something I want to impress upon everybody here. Realize your impact. We got our car, we're cultivating, we're adjusting our approaches. Realize your impact as individuals, as management, as employees, as peers, as representatives of the company, even in your personal lives. Your impact, I cannot impress this enough. Your impact is so important. And this is outside of Pride and Pride Month. But people have come up to me months later, years later, and reminded me of something I did or said that was insignificant to me, that made an impact to them at that moment. There have been times that I had an opportunity myself to be an ally, but because I told you I'm the invisible man now, I didn't speak up. There have been times that I've been in situations and heard somebody make a comment about gay people or about a parade, and this is outside of Afghanistan, outside of a combat zone. Okay, I can be forgiven for that. But there have been other times that I may not have spoken up the way I should have or could have. And the only things I regret the times I didn't speak up. I've never regretted a time I did speak up. But we, as allies and advocates, that question came up: how can we be better allies and advocates? That pronoun thing. Sometimes it's just about telling somebody, hey, you can't apply that stereotype to everybody. Sometimes we want everybody to be the ally or advocate that shows up waving the flag or speaking from the bullhorn. That's not how everybody operates. I want people to operate in their comfort zone, but with humanity in their mind. I told you I was been working at the place I've been working at for over 4 years, and I've never been in a situation where I was made to feel uncomfortable. That doesn't mean individuals may not have made certain comments, but they were always corrected. And so a way that you can ally or advocate is not by necessarily speaking in HR talk the way that they did in that training module that we've all used. Hi, Bill, that's not appropriate. We may need to talk to Carol about that later. No, sometimes it's a nudge. Hey, man, that's not cool. Use real language, real situations, and show up for people the way you would show up for a human, for a person, not necessarily a gay person, a lesbian person, a transgender person. Just showing each other the respect that's due just for being a part of this fabric that we're all a part of. And in that, we have to receive how others show up for us. And we may not even appreciate in that moment that somebody showed up for us a certain way, and it may have to sit in it a certain way. Okay, that was a form of allyship. That was a form of advocacy. And again, just because this person doesn't own a rainbow colored flag, or just because they're not going to march in this pride parade, that person may be petitioning or donating money to this situation, or maybe contributing to other causes, or just talking to HR or correcting colleagues when necessary. So when we respect how others show up and realize that these allies and advocates come in different forms. So we got our car, we've cultivated, we're ready to adjust our approaches. We're recognizing and realizing the importance of our impact. I'll give you some key takeaways. And you like how I did that? You got your keys now. Showing up authentically allows others to do the same. I could be the invisible man. Nobody would think twice. When I show up authentically, I allow that kid over there who's struggling with something to show up authentically. I've given him permission. I've shown him that, wow, this person is somebody who's existing. This person is someone who's had a cool career, who's out there volunteering. and this person is hasn't suffered because of it. Showing up authentically allows others to do the same. Companies, management, leadership, and just peers recognizing the value in diversity. We are not a homogenous society, and how boring it would be if we were. When people feel free to bring themselves to work, their creativity, their thoughts, their mindsets, that's how we move these trajectories. If everybody came from the same background and had the same experiences and brought those to the table, your company would be selling the same product. And if your products, people, you want that is enhanced. You want that beautiful representation of what we really look like as a society. And never underestimate the impact you have on those you encounter. Again, every day that you encounter somebody, every day that you show up for somebody, that's a seed that you're planting, and you may not cultivate those fruits till way later, but it becomes a blessing to you, and it definitely becomes a blessing to them. Here we go. There she is again. And we're opening it up to questions again. I love this quote. This is from Jason Collins. He's a former NBA player. Openness may not completely disarm prejudice, but it's a good place to start.
Love it. Thank you so much, Troy. We have about 13 minutes and I have a lot of questions to go through, so I'm just going to bounce them at you, okay?
All right, I'm gonna jot them down. Some of them. Go ahead. You
All
might see
right.
me scribbling. All right.
All right. The first one is, how can corporations do more for the community it serves?
Starting, I don't know if we're saying, I'm gonna go two ways with this. If we're saying the communities that they serve, as far as just having a positive footprint in the communities that they are physically in, one thing, just finding ways to give back, encouraging people to volunteer in these communities, arranging some of these resource groups that companies have, arranging volunteer events. If we're talking about the community as far as the LGBTQI community, QIA community that are within that company, it started with things like this. And these are these events, these opportunities to engage, to ask questions without fear of retribution. And excuse me, and that's called investing in your own people.
All right, perfect. Thank you. I think Amanda had something.
Yep. So I had a question come through. So someone wants to know, what advice would you give to someone who wanted to have this conversation with their family or their parents? Or what advice would you give to the parents if children came forward, and they needed to feel comfortable having this conversation as a family?
I would say this to the person standing in the shoes of the person. There's a level of emotional maturity that you have to have yourself. And maybe it's something you have to cultivate. Maybe you have to find a support system before you go to your family. When I finally came to my family and told them I was transitioning, and I'm the youngest child, I come from a close-knit family, but it was difficult for me to tell them I am transitioning because they had put up with all my shenanigans before. So this was the one time that I had to come to them and say this, and I had to be prepared to lose them. And I had to come to them saying, I'm not asking you this, I'm telling you this. So if you are that person standing in those shoes, and there are support systems there for you and people to help you to get that emotional support, or that even to develop that emotional maturity that you are willing to lose certain things to stand in your truth, then that's when you're ready to tell them. For the parents or the family members who maybe want to have the conversation with people around you or your children, and you think you can start by asking direct questions, hey, or letting them know you can talk to me. When you're impressed, people know what's going on. If you're coming to somebody, hey, you can talk to me about anything. If there's something you need to discuss, I'm open to it. You may not realize how open I am to things, but I am. So impressing upon those people around you that you are open, they, we all kind of get the drift and the energy when you're coming with that conversation.
All right, thank you for that answer. Another question we have is, what advice can you give to people on how to be I'm sorry, that wrong question. What kind of things might a trans person or someone going through that transition go through when they begin to acknowledge their true gender identity?
One thing that I did not get to in the slides, and one thing I was able to avoid during my own transition, was just the physical awkwardness. Um, I have I was the quintessential tomboy growing up. The pictures you see me in a dress that was for that picture. 5 minutes later, I had on dirty sneakers and a t-shirt and jeans. I always dressed the way I identified. As a female bodied, I had a athletic body type, and so I was people called me he and him and sir all the time anyway. That is not everybody's truth. And I was in the Middle East and people thought I was a guy, male anyway. It was easier for me. For someone in America who has to sit in a desk every day and they decide to one day move from wearing khakis and shirts to blouses and skirts, that is difficult. That is terrifying. That is something I can not imagine. So I can appreciate the bravery of anyone who does that. And someone if you see that awkwardness, again, being an ally or support there, you don't have to go and join the ERG, but maybe telling that person that you see that seems to be transitioning, even if it's socially, and by that I mean wearing different clothes or starting to use the different pronouns. Hey, it takes courage doing what you're doing. Hey, I support you in this. And support, they're not about to ask you for money or to do this, but hearing those words goes a long way.
Thank you. Um, Man, did you have another one on your end? Okay. This one's from Alex in the Q&A chat, but how do I make myself more approachable to people who are, lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender? What do I do if I want to come to my office, local community, or within the context and other groups I am a part of?
What was the last part of the question? What do I want to do with
I'm
the
thinking, what do I do if someone who is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender wants to come out? Okay, wants to come out in my office, local community, or within the context of any other group I am part of.
you can
So
tell them thank you for trusting me with that information. Thank you for sharing that with me. I appreciate you sharing that with me. If you're trying to let people know that you are inclusive, and you though that's when you can have those one-on-one conversations with uh with your teams. Hi, if there's something you want to talk about, if there are ways that can make we can make you more comfortable here. And these things are gender neutral, sexuality neutral, these kind of conversations. Hey, I want you to feel like you're part of a team. I do want you to feel comfortable bringing yourself to work. There's something that you need to talk to me about. We can discuss it. I'm open. If you ever feel uncomfortable, you can come talk to me about things that are out there that are going on. And there are some words that people kind of tend to hang on to as key words, and they kind of get where you're going with that. And I'm sure it's not always just limited to sexuality and gender. But if someone does come out to you, the reaction can and you could is, hey, I appreciate you coming to me with that. I like to know what challenges my team faces. And this can lead the way for more conversation.
thank you, thank you. Um, what do you suggest we as professionals do to ensure that we are being approachable, accepting, and supportive while being professional, respectful at the same time?
Correcting, I said if correcting anyone who is inappropriate is one thing, or if someone makes that inappropriate joke, you being that person that says, "Hey, that's not cool." People will definitely see that as allyship or professionalism, and they'll know, okay, this is a safe space. And when I use the term safe space, remember you're talking to a guy who my idea of safe space was anywhere I wasn't being shot at. Now I can appreciate corporate America as a safe space. Um, and again, using that same language, reminding your teams, even during meetings, hey guys, keep it professional around here. Or it could be something, another time it could be the tone of the meeting. Hey, let's just talk about the ability to bring ourselves to work. Some people are just starting to come back into the office. When I say bring yourself to work, I want you to bring your personality to work. We're here because of that. We can all still sit and do this online, but let's bring our personality to work. We appreciate different personalities around here. We appreciate we're diverse around here. We're inclusive around here. Using those words remind people that they are welcome here.
All right, beautiful. Let's see here. How can we build an atmosphere of inclusion regardless of our personal or religious views?
I love that question. I love that question. I touched on it before, and I've said it a lot. A lot of this is about humanity and letting people know that they are welcome. And it's not about forcing politics or an agenda or anything like that. It's this person who I don't know anything about, whether they are gay, straight, or any of that. We're here to tell you, you make up the fabric. You're important. You're important contributor. Um, those those words, and when it comes down to you, I can't tell you how to reconcile your personal religious beliefs or beliefs that you've grown up with. But to me, that question is asked lets me know that that may not even be what's holding you back if you're tying it to that. When you can look at people as just individuals, or this is still parts of humanity. And I don't think there is a religion out there that's telling you to hate humanity.
Perfect. Thank you. I think that is the majority of my questions. A lot of them I think you've pretty much answered throughout your presentation. If anyone does have any last minute questions that you want to direct, now is the time. Otherwise, I'm sure, Troy, is there a way that, if we have more questions that
No,
pop up later on, we can connect with you and get those answers for them?
we can't actually. Let's see. Yep. Okay. So we have
Oh,
this
perfect.
screen. Yeah. And actually, bear with me because I'm in the process of repopulating some of these. Okay. So Let's Chat is the best one right now, and that LinkedIn, and everything else is coming back online. I told you for a while I kind of went off, was the invisible man. Now I'm getting back into these opportunities, and thank you, Lily, and thank you, CoWorks, and thank all of you again too. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for your attentiveness. Thank you for engaging, and just take it back with you. Take something back from the. Uh, Even if it's just showing up authentically, placing yourselves in places that you show up authentically, because I promise you, that's where you'll thrive.
Thank you so much, Troy. As we're wrapping this up, I just want to thank again Troy for joining us today. You've had a lot of great information, very insightful. Also like to thank, Amanda, Michelle, and Sean for helping put this together, as well as the Pride Council. Remember, guys, we are still growing. So if you do want to be part of the ZERG group, please reach out to me or Michelle or Amanda. And let's watch as this grows. I can't wait till the next event. So thank you again, Troy, for everything. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Everyone have a
Thank you so
great day and a
much.
great weekend.
Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
Troy. Thank you.
Bye bye.